Hey gang, Alan Combies here. Welcome to another video in this series that I call Morning Coffee with Alan. And in this video, what I was inspired to talk about is resisting your pain, resisting your emotions, resisting, being afraid of feeling emotions. And the reason I thought this was a good topic is because it's so common, and I think it can be a tricky thing when you're up against it, because we might think that we're dealing with, a relationship issue, or we're dealing with, um, pain or addiction, but oftentimes what is behind the challenge, the problem, the pain, the issue, the symptom is a resistance to actually processing the emotion. And the more I do this work, the more I really see, uh, tapping, FasterEFT style, Robert Smith style. The more I do this work, the more I see tapping as really a process of moving through and accepting the emotion, because once we stop fighting the thing that we're creating, it disappears essentially. So the struggle is the resistance to the very thing that we have created. In other words, we create a story in our minds about an experience that we had. That story is going against who we really are, and so because those thoughts are really going against our greater, it's going against, it's making us feel like we're not infinite. So these thoughts are creating pain in the body, because that pain is because those thoughts are telling you that you're not infinite, that you're somehow broken, and we resist the pain, but it's the pain that's telling us, "Hey, wake up! Your thinking is off track." And because we're misunderstanding what the pain is trying to communicate, we resist it, and we push it away. We try to drink it away. We smoke it away. We do all these things. And if we don't move through it, then eventually the body begins to react. So it moves from, anxiety and sadness and fear, and it turns into ulcers or back pain or neck pain and headaches and things like that. And so the big piece here is to begin to recognize that what you are experiencing, first of all, is something that your own mind has created. And that's not good or bad, it just is. But it's just a story, right? No matter what the story is about, it could be about something that absolutely happened to you. But when you begin to realize that that event is no longer happening, and what's happening is a story that you're telling yourself over and over again, then instead of running from that story, you can stand and face it head on and begin to defractionate yourself, begin to pull yourself out of that self-hypnotic trance that you created, right? So as you begin to stop resisting the message that your body is trying to tell you, it begins to disappear. And that is essentially what this is all about, in my experience. A great example of this is a client that I just worked with. We ended up addressing her cigarette smoking habit, a pain that she had, and a grief and loss issue, all all in the same session. Why? Because they were all related. And this is very, very common. We have multiple symptoms or problems, and there's a thread that runs through them all, oftentimes. And so this client actually came to me for a smoking cessation. But the more I spoke with her, the more it was very obvious to me that it wasn't about the smoking. The smoking was a symptom of the emotional stuff that she was going through, and how she was resisting parts of it in her mind. And so as we began to address the grief and loss issues, the major emotional drivers in that piece, then guess what happened? Literally within that session, the desire to smoke went down, and the pain began to go down. And then, of course, we addressed the pain directly. We addressed the smoking directly, but it went so much quicker because we went to the emotional driver. Now, a big piece of that was her resistance to grieving. And with grief and loss, often we say, well, people often feel justified in their grieving, and rightfully so. I mean, you have the right to feel whatever you want to feel. But if you don't allow yourself to go through that and feel it, and if you continue to resist it, or tell yourself stories like you were guilty, or you should have done more, you could have been more, or all of these different things, and you continue to resist those stories and push back on them, then you're going to create more of a problem. And so that's what this client was doing. They were resisting the grieving process, and as a result, their body was knocking on the door saying, hey, you need to go through this, you need to accept this, you need to feel this, you need to process this, and I'm going to keep knocking until you hear me. And then, of course, the smoking was just a coping skill, and really the smoking was a blip on the radar compared to the other things that we dealt with, even though that's what they came to see me for in the first place. It's fascinating, isn't it? So what's the moral of the story here? Where are you resisting the feelings? Where are you resisting the pain? Because no matter what you're experiencing, it's the mind, it's your mind that has made it up. Kyle Cease says the mind loves to create puzzles and then go and solve them. So it's creating its own problems for it to solve. Right? Well, the biggest thing that you can do is begin to recognize that that's just entertainment, right? And you can spend time there if you want. But the real key is to recognize, what are you feeling in that moment? And if you're feeling the negative emotions, don't run from it. Don't try to escape it. Don't try to drink it down or drug it down or sex it out or shop it away, right? Stand and face it and move through it and process it. And that's where real healing begins. I hope that makes sense. This is Alan Combies, another edition of Morning Coffee with Alan. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.